Hello, everyone, and welcome to Ventures. I'm excited about today's episode with Sol Cates and Weston Woodward. In this conversation, we talk about all things building community. Community for yourself, community for your startup, community for your city and geographic region. And we talk about a lot of the nuances of things to do, things not to do, and things that Sol and Weston have found helpful in their careers. They are two of the most amazing super connectors I have ever met. And so we dive into a lot of the things that they've learned over their years and things to share with you. So if you are listening, you can also watch by visiting wclittle.com. And there you'll see more extensive show notes to the things that we talk about today. And if you're watching, you can also listen anywhere that you get your podcasts. You can just search for Ventures. So with that, please enjoy this conversation with Weston Woodward and Sol Cates. So I'm super excited for this conversation. Sol, would you mind teeing us up and welcoming our guests?
For sure, yeah. So I think this is quite a few now, 10 or so episodes I've done with you, and I keep loving these. So recently I sort of explored my network, I think I said in another episode, and run into so many cool people. And one of the people that I met recently was Weston, and we got just I think we had maybe 20 minutes of chat time together, and within that 20 minutes, wow, I really like you, and I think you like me, and we really liked what we could do with each other. And that's when I realized that folks like Weston and others like me are these connectors. I think we talked about super connectors and stuff like that. Eric brought that up in a previous episode, and so I thought it'd be fun to actually bring I think you are a connector by profession, so I'll let you introduce yourself, Weston. If I don't want to cheapen what you can do, but I really want to explore that, because to me, I didn't realize I was really a connector. I've always just been well, that person needs to know that person, and otherwise, it's the obvious thing. They should know each other, right? Or that person could solve that person's problem, right? I'm very familiar with that. So I thought we would go all in on that. So Weston, why don't I let you sort of take it from here and introduce yourself and maybe a little bit of history and then what you're up to these days.
Yeah, no, again, thanks for having me, guys. I always tell folks that I'm a connector, producer, and community builder based here in Austin, Texas, but you can always find me jetting around to either my second home in the Dominican Republic or across the country. A little background on me: I've been in Austin the last 17 years, had a varied history with my career, going from politics, government, startups, till I landed at a creative agency running business development and accounts, and had the opportunity to run into someone, my friend Lucia Cotone, and she kind of worked with me to figure out what is the underlying thread with my career, why I was always jumping around. And what we figured out was what's now my purpose statement, which is to connect people to make the world a better place. And so currently, the last 4 years, I've been off on my own connecting people. And what that looks like is business development, market development. But I've also had the opportunity, I started 2 marriages, not for me, but for other people, and just help people meet each other and find business partners, find investors, find clients that need to work together. And through that process, that's how I got to connect with Sol. Was one of my friends introduced me to Eric in Lincoln, Nebraska, and we just hit it off and started connecting folks for his business and then for other people's businesses. And then also in tandem to market development, biz dev, I produce an event series here in Austin, Texas, and eventually it'll hit the road. And then also produce some television, film, and animation projects as well. And love really involved my community here in Austin and abroad, just trying to make the world a little bit better than what it was when I first arrived.
Dude, that's so awesome. Yeah.
And so were you like this as a kid? Were you introverted, extroverted, connecting people, or what was the childhood like?
So my sister always makes fun of me because when I was a kid, I was actually very introverted. I would actually close my eyes if people were looking at me because I thought I could disappear. But gradually over the years, what happened was we moved so many times. So I'm a son of a preacher man. So I'm a PK, is what they call it. And we moved about 8 or 9 times growing up. And so each time I would have to walk into the cafeteria and sit alone. And eventually I just started building up my confidence to go meet people. And I think through that process, I learned how to find commonalities with people in various cultures. Because, I lived in, California and New Jersey, two very different cultures, and then lived in Texas. And then, of course, traveling a lot. It's forced me out of my shell. So now I would say I'm very much extroverted, and I love meeting people. And I usually enter a room full of people and leave with 5 friends.
Yeah.
So you two are amongst the most wonderful, talented, extremely generous connectors that I know. Maybe Sol, for those who don't know you, if this is their first time meeting you, do you want to just do a quick background and even for you and your own, were you always the super connector, or was this something that came later?
No, that's a great thing. I mean, when Weston was giving his story, it reminded me of myself a little bit, right? I was an introvert as a kid. If you look back at my parents got divorced when I was young, right? And I know that was part of my growing as a human later on in life. But during that time, I was sort of that angry little kid, but it was angry with myself and inside myself. And, so I was in here a lot in my own head, and I got really good at creating things. And I really got good at fascinating and becoming fascinated with other curious things. Computers were my playthings. I think we've talked about that in the past. So I got really good at games and computers and software, and I loved it because to me it was like how I interacted with the world through my vision that I wanted, right? So I've always had this sort of utopian, part of me that I was trying to build, but I was an introvert that didn't really know how to work very well with others. I didn't make friends very easily when I was a kid because I think I said this before, I break their toy because I want to know how their toy works and I'm going to make it better, right? But that's how I learned, and to me, it made me struggle through the growth parts of adolescence and stuff. And I definitely hit some dark places in my life and found some great light at the end of those tunnels in the end, and found some great people that helped me learn. But one of the things that taught me some stuff, you had your sort of path, Weston, but I think the one that taught me a lot was in my career. So part of my background is I went into cybersecurity, and I was really good with computers. I was smart. I was the smartest kid in the room. And I'd walk in the room and I'd be like, oh, I know how all this works, and I can cheat and win every time, and they'll never know, right? And I was good at that. In computers, that's called hacking, right? So that turns you into somebody that goes into interesting rooms. And so as I got around others and had to work with others to solve problems on a grander scale, I started to come out of my shell. I learned how to talk to others that either at that same level of bandwidth, right? They could get what I was saying and I could get what they were saying. Like we were at the same level. And then I was an extrovert, right? Because now I could communicate with other people that understood me and I understood them. And that's when I figured, all I had to do is have a common language with them. And that's when I figured out how to make friends really good. Over time in my career, I've hit different places, but got really good at figuring out what is that person's passion. And then I can unlock a conversation with them. So later on, when I need them to be that friend, they're not only that bond that we've created by working together and getting to know each other, but they are a superpower on the other end of a phone call, right? And that's where you can really change somebody's life because you have a connection to somebody that was passionate about something that can move the needle for somebody else. And all you have to do is remember that kindness that someone treated you or you gave to somebody else by just listening to understand what they're really good at and what they want help with. So that's when I became more of an extrovert. I could learn how to take that at scale, and I could go and sit in front of a very large audience and do a presentation for thousands of people. And because now I knew how to talk at a level that all of these people would understand, because I'd learned all the commonalities of the different types of people out there, right? Some people are like me, and some people are more a traditional extrovert. So, yeah, I think I evolved into it.
Yeah, I always tell people because of moving so much, I became a chameleon. And just learn how to adapt. So if I'm like in the Dominican with, my friends down there that have like nothing, but then I can also hang out with folks that have everything. Like I'm able to really navigate through those waters. But because of my upbringing, I really feel.
So Weston, the last year and a half or so has been quite a shock to the world and multiple facets. For you in your line of work, what changed? What got better? What got worse? What are you noticing in your world?
Yeah, I mean, it was. The last 12, 18 months was pretty wild. I do all my work remote anyway, so I would say I almost started working more during the pandemic because I wasn't driving to meetings or anything like that. I was just hopping on calls, and people really wanted to connect because I think we were all holed up in our homes for a bit. Austin was shut down for at least 2 months. And so that just gave me the ability to really connect. That's when I met Eric in Nebraska, was during that time. So not much has changed. What I will say is I called 2020 the year of the great pause. And it really made me think through of like, who are the people that I want around me, both personally and professionally? And what do I want my main focuses to be? So I'm really spending this year to really refine what that is, because some folks are blown away with all the different things I'm working on. I like the diversity of it, but I also know that eventually I'm going to start whittling it down. So it really gave me a time of reflection and figuring out where I really want to see myself go in the next 5-10 years.
And then in terms of connecting people, what did the community building change in some way, or was it accelerated, decelerated, nuanced differently? Like what are you seeing?
Yeah, I would say now it's kind of coming back online. It's pretty much normal. I host in-person outdoor happy hour once a week with founders and investors. We're getting about 15 to 20 people showing up to that week. I would say at the beginning of the pandemic, we started with Eric, we started hosting virtual meetups just with folks that we had started connecting with, like through LinkedIn or just through our connections, and introducing our networks together. So I would say it almost it was different. Before the pandemic, I was, going out and doing social events. Now it's become more targeted, I would say. I've thought through like, where do I really want to spend my energy in the connections? And so it's become more thoughtful versus before it was more like, run and gun.
How about you, Sol, and all those things in your world? What are you seeing?
Yeah, no, that last sort of segment, around social media and bridging to virtual, sort of events, and then also the bridging back to physical type interactions again. It's like, I've also gone through sort of a journey. I haven't gotten back to the physicals yet. I'm not there because I don't feel good until I get my second jab about it. But once I'm there, I think I'll be ready for that type of stuff. But I think the biggest impact, or I don't know if it's impact, like it made me focus a lot more on networking through tools and networking, like LinkedIn or others, like just leveraging those tools that I could get hands on and scale myself with. Where I focused. So I think it was getting economies of scale through tooling is probably the biggest change.
So a lot of people listening in are founders, crazy people with wild ideas to that they have to pursue. They're trying to make the world a better place, et cetera, et cetera. From your experience, Weston, what makes a good founder?
Personally, the ones that I really like, I enjoy connecting with, are those that are abundant minded, where they're willing to give first, then take. So that's kind of how especially after I was saying like last year, like I'm really focusing on where I invest my energy in, and those folks that are also going to be willing to invest in other people. So I think that's what I think, being abundant minded and being a good listener. I think not. Hemingway has a great quote. I'm going to misquote it, but basically says, "Not many people listen." And I think those that listen, those are the ones that really can get, feedback from folks. They can find those commonalities that could, lead to their next partner or next investor, and be willing to know that they don't have an ego. I think that's what I kind of view with founders and those that are trying to make the world a better place. I don't want to help founders out that are destroying the world.
Yeah. No,
That's good.
I
So, yeah, what do you think?
share. Yeah, no, I share that same sentiment, and I know Will does too. Like, I don't like working with people that are trying to do bad things. I try to find ways to create regenerative, either, economies or equalities or, rebalance things. Like, I love the idea of some ventures out there that, like, for every dollar I make, I'm going to make sure a tree gets planted to offset Brazil, right? Those are great little ideas that do have an impact at scale, right? So it's those types of things that I really like seeing good ideas rallied around, cloned, or reinforced by others.
So I don't know if you guys experienced this, but during the quarantine, I noticed that my sleep was super affected. I started getting this kind of biphasic sleep cycle. I'd wake up for 2-3 hours in the middle of the night, and I tried all kinds of diet and exercise and behavior hacks to try to fix it. And what ultimately ended up fixing it for me was taking about 75% less meetings. There was something about not having a commute, tons of Zoom meetings, everybody else being in Zoom meetings where it was tempting to just pack the calendar with meeting new people and trying to, meet people and stay social. And so for me personally, this was sort of an aha that there was something going on with the video connection that I think was messing with my brain. But for the two of you, were there life lessons or things that you learned about yourself and about your social nature sort of through through this quarantine?
Yeah, I would say for me, I actually was grinding my teeth like crazy, but I think part of it was there was so much uncertainty about the virus and about the world, and it was wild. I agree with you about the Zoom meetings and stuff. Like that did start wearing on me. But probably halfway through quarantine, where I started doing more phone calls versus video meetings, just so that I could get up and walk around and not have to like focus so much. And I think that does drain your eyes for certain. But I would say less meetings for sure has helped a lot with sleeping, and also I think now with I'm fully vaccinated, so there's like that. Like I don't have to worry about that, and that's really taken off a lot of. Let me sleep, deeper.
I think for me, the stimulation level of the last year has been way high. Like I because left unchecked in my own room in here, tinkering away with friends and toys and connections and building, new inventions and all that. It's very exciting when everybody's a connection away. So we talked about evolving, my own personality over time. Now I'm actively out looking for people to like work with. And yeah, if that's all I'm doing all day, every day, and I don't have anything else to supplement that, that's a bad thing. It doesn't, you can't do that for a whole year. It wears out, or wears you out. So that hit me, and about November, December of last year, just going too hard, doing all of it. I just, I'll try. I'm gonna take all the meetings. I'm gonna do all the things, and I couldn't. So, definitely learned that there's other gears besides fifth.
So Weston, the producer part of your work, tell us about that. What are you producing?
Yeah, so a producer, where there's different types of producers. I'm a connector, but that's what a lot of the role of a producer is. It's helping find money. It's helping find strategic partners. It's helping find distribution outlets. And so for a lot of the projects that I'm currently working on, it's just that. It's literally like, hey, I know someone that's really passionate about this topic. They can either write a check, or maybe they want to like do some in-kind services, or they know someone else that could help get it in front of the right eyes to buy it. So that's kind of that. It's really just like what I'm doing in my other roles of connecting, just in media.
Yeah, that's cool. It's amazing though, isn't it? How it's the same game, sort of like there's all these plays you can do, and there's like these playbooks you can start to amass, but it's all a game. right? At least that's how I view it. And connecting is just putting players together with who's got what resources, where is their intent, and how does it face, like you can collectively sort of organize them, different outcomes happen, right? And that's how I think about it. So do you think about it that way? I mean, do you think like as a game in your head, or is it more like
No,
yeah.
literally I don't view it, I don't view connecting as an end goal to money. I view it as how can I solve this problem? Like one of the phone calls I got one time was this guy asked me, he's like, I have a client that needs a helicopter, goes from Sedona to Phoenix this weekend. Do you know someone? And I made one quick text and I was able to access a helicopter. So I just love, and I wasn't making any money off the transaction. But I get joy out of it. So I actually, this year I started keeping a Google Doc of just all the wins that I know that through my connection, something has come out of it. And that's been kind of, beneficial to me to keep me going down this route, because it can be draining at times where like you feel like you're not appreciated. But it's a fun game.
Yeah, that last part you just said rings home. I've met many people, not myself. I've been beneficiary because I think I've sort of played my game where I'm a connector, but I'm still like a core player on the team inside of like these big machines, like where I work now or other companies. So having a strong leadership position, but still have that flexibility, it was something I always desired, right? So that gave me sort of that sort of ability to go and try to accomplish new things with new people, and take down these sort of problems by simply creating a room, right? I always said just create the room and something good will happen in that room, right? Do you sort of think about that way? Is it like you're creating a room for people to happen? I mean, you said you think you created a couple marriages. I mean, is that what happened? You created a room for them to be in, or
oh yeah,
is it magic?
One of the marriages was my cousin. She was the last one with her two other sisters to be married, and she really wanted to get married. And I had a good friend of mine that was moving to where she lived. And so I literally just like, oh, they got to meet. I think they'll hit it off. And I introduced them to one another. 6 months later, they were engaged.
Wow.
And happily married. And so like I love setting up those scenarios. So like another good example is I produced an event or helped produce an event at Sundance. And I didn't want to be like on any of the panels or anything like that. I just liked, looking from above from the second floor and seeing everyone in the room, like meeting each other and having a great time. And that's what brings me joy, is if I can create the room, like you said, for people to meet with one another.
I kind of chuckled a little bit when you said you built a spreadsheet for yourself. In startup land, we often, especially with regard to SaaS applications, we often say, look where people are creating documents or spreadsheets for yourselves, because there's probably an opportunity there. So I chuckled because we are actually incubating a product in the connecting humans space that is kind of like that for people, that will help them sort of track the wins. And we're trying to do it in a lot of our applications right now that we're incubating internally. We're trying to do it in a Web3 way. We're trying to do it in a way that's not going to create yet another identity, another data silo. It feels like it's a little too early, but I think we may sort of stumble with everybody else in the Web3 journey through that, because I think a decentralized future is probably the way to go. But from your perspective, Austin, obviously pretty hot spot right now for a whole variety of reasons. And do you have any take on the Web3 blockchain world? Like what's your general perspective on that?
I have a lot of friends in this space. It's definitely, you either don't know anything about it or like are all in. And I'm kind of like, I straddle both of them. I'm still learning a lot about blockchain and decentralization. And, my last agency I was at, all of our clients were libertarian think tanks or those that were libertarian. So this was definitely a hot topic that they were exploring, just because, Seasteading Institute, to all these other groups that are wanting to live off the grid and not have government involved. It's definitely a hot thing in Austin. I will say that. I would say it's being kind of muted somewhat, just with all the folks that are moving here from a little bit larger companies. But it's fascinating. I'm really interested to see where it goes.
And just on the topic of, sorry, Saul, were you going to say something?
Oh, no, I was just going to say that the decentralization doesn't only live in Austin. It's out there in other cities like Portland too, right? We're weird too. But no, I think it is, spot on. Like it's something that's emerging. You asked, is it too early? I don't know if it's too early. I think it is that stumbling era where we're staggering through and trying to hopefully build another utopia, because that's what Web 1 was supposed to be. Web 2 definitely wasn't, and Web 3 is supposed to be again, or needs to be, hopefully. So,
right. So just because it's Miami and Austin are sort of in the news, let's say, I've heard so many different things. So 17 years, I heard you say, in Austin. So that's almost essentially saying OG Austin, because my experience in the 2000s of Austin was this magical, amazing place. And I think it's, tell us about the evolution of Austin and from your perspective, especially as a community-minded person. What's your take?
Yeah, so I mean, like when I came to school here at University of Texas, and back then I would say it was definitely more of a hippie, weird town. We had Leslie, who was a homeless man that like would wear very decorative thongs and matching outfits and high heels, and he ran for mayor. And so it's very much, in music and all that jazz. Over the years, there was a transition in it becoming more like hipster, and tech started really exploding with the startup scene really growing and becoming a little bit more mature. And now it's next level. I mean, I would say before the pandemic, they were saying 150 people were moving here every day. I would say now probably 300 to 400 people are moving here every day. The housing market, there are no houses. I mean, I think there's less than 300 homes on the market. And it's just wild. And, I get connected to a lot of these new folks, and a lot of interesting people are moving here. So I'm really excited to see where it goes. But I also, as a community builder, and some of my other friends that are really involved in the city, what we're trying to do is help these new people cast the vision of where we want to see the city go versus where the city kind of has been stagnant in. Austin is amazing, but we do have some issues around, of course, homelessness issue, and the city just hasn't really addressed it. We just want to sweep it under the rug, and I don't think that's going to go away. I think it's going to continue to grow. So we need to build resources and figure out ways to help our neighbors that are here. And but I'm excited to see where Austin will go. I mean, there's talks that Elon's going to build a community outside of city limits with a rocket ship in the middle. We have one of my friends is a Broadway producer, and Broadway shut down for 3 years, so she's producing experiences here in Austin. Joe Rogan came in and is opening a comedy store right outside town, and so there's just a lot of activity happening here, which I'm excited about.
So then, with regard to community building and the startup communities, I personally got to see up close and personal the interesting growth curves with the Seattle startup community and the Chicago startup community. But from your perspective, somebody who's in the game, actively participating, what are the elements? What are the elements of a healthy startup community, and what are things that are maybe not so healthy?
My mindset is, like I said before, being abundant minded and collaborative. I would say there is a growing pool of folks that are like that. I would say Austin in the past was very siloed, and these different incubators, accelerator programs, and the leadership is kind of keeping their own fiefdoms. But I'm starting to see that kind of break down. You're seeing more investors come in. We don't really have that many. We didn't really have that many venture money or private equity money. We're starting to see that more, or I'm starting to see that more, and I'm starting to see people wanting to collaborate more. So there's still aspects of people keeping their network close, which I've never had that mentality. I want to connect everyone together that needs to be connected, but there's still some of that lingering where people they're not as generous with their connections.
Yeah, I like when you're more open and diverse with your connections, or just I like diversity in an area, right? In so many different ways. So like, a diversity of background, of insight, of education, of sexuality, of race, religion. The whole thing matters, right? Because everybody, when you come look at something, will have a significantly different, idea or perception of the problem or the solutions or the way to approach it. So the more you add to it, the better, but you still have to manage that over time, and you have to figure out how to keep the disruptors, the negative disruptors, out of the machine or neutralize them, and you keep the reinforcers of good stuff moving things forward and progressing things. So that's where I think cities like Austin and other communities out there could be really sort of like beachheads for some of those transformations that happen, and these new communities that start to still rely upon tooling but help to redesign our tooling around ourselves, right, and our reliance upon it. Technology over the last 20-30 years has really advanced, and we haven't really kept up with how we depend upon it and how we're going to govern it, because the machines that we've built have taken over us. They're not the ones that we thought on Judgment Day. It's the Facebooks of the world and stuff like that we created.
Yeah,
That's different.
That's the one thing that I'm like super passionate about too. So like a couple years ago, Cigna did a health study, and they found that 50% of Americans don't have a friend. And so there's 50% of our country is at home, like with no one that they can pick up a phone and call. And so that's why, like, talking about diversity of thought and opinion, like I think that's our society has kind of crumbled some and become more divided because I think of the technology. That instead of going out and having to meet people, like, oh, I have friends on Facebook. And what that happens is that, the different thoughts and opinions, you don't get exposed to them as much, and it's hurting. So that's why I'm big on folks, traveling. One of the companies I help connect for is a software staffing firm down in Mexico. Mm. There's a stigma here in Texas, even, about how we view Mexico. And what they don't know is if they started doing business with them, they'd realize, like, oh, they're very much like us, like not much different.
Wow. 50% of people don't have did they define that? How did they define friend? Somebody you could call, or do you remember?
Yeah, I think someone that you can call, which, I mean, it's sad, but like, I know people that don't have any friends. It's just wild to me because I'm such a social guy. So and I think part of it, like growing up, being, the kid alone at the cafeteria table, I've always wanted to include people. Mm. I never want people to feel like they are alone. And, it's scary though, that's how our country's ended up, because we used to be very community focused back in the day, and now we're not.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, we used to be very town center, square focused, or if you go back even farther, village, and then even the nomad layers, and what are the communities that we've been, watching evolve to our industrial versions now. I think we still have to remember that we came from communities and people and families, and they make up these machines that employ us, and we keep our lights on, and we keep our bodies fed through industrialization now. We need to reassess a little bit of that, and I think community is a big part of it.
Oh yeah,
man, half of people, that breaks my heart.
You can't get past that.
I know. Well,
we just recently had a big internal conversation about just social media. The good, bad, and the ugly about Web 2, the promises of Web 3, how people in our network use or don't use social media, and I'm now sort of I'm reflecting on that statistic that if all I often wonder, and when I scroll through, it's almost like watching a train wreck, going through some of the YouTube comments and others. I always wonder, like, who are these people that spend all their time trolling comment threads and just spewing hate and I wonder if it is, in one sense, that simple. It's like these are people that have think that by being social online, that is their community, that their friends that they interact with anonymously or not on forums or various social media platforms, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe it's hacking our brains and making us think that that's real community when in many ways it's not, and it's causing a mental health crisis. That, not the first. I think there's a lot of people pointing out this fact. But what's your general take on social media and like how people are interacting online and any comments on?
Yeah, I mean, I think social media, I mean, it can be useful, but it can also be very destructive. I mean, I just have seen even like people in my own network like have breakdowns on social media, or they get in silos and spew hate. But I also think there's a problem in our country where people lack purpose, and I feel like we're creatures that need a purpose. And so if you don't have that, then it can be dangerous with social media how you can leverage that to create a fake purpose or a dangerous purpose on there. And if you are stuck at home alone and you don't have any sense of community, and there is a negative group that, that's how you can get recruited. I mean, that's where I think, extreme terrorists, it's mostly lonely people that don't have community and they feel a sense of purpose with that group.
Yeah. If you ever go look into counterterrorism, right, and you actually look into what they're doing to try to find, how these communities get created, you're spot on, right? It is recruitment, it is indoctrination, it is, you say propaganda, or what have you. But at the end of the day, it's a formula to get certain people that are in the right state of mind into a different state of mind. Yeah. And that's a formula for intelligence officers. Go talk to a PsyOps person. They'll tell you all sorts of great ways to influence people that are in that state of mind. And if 50% of our people out there don't have a friend, that's prime for some PsyOps. Yep. That is what those machines really are. It's the PsyOps against us that it's reinforcing it, fortunately, I think, too.
Mm-hmm. So in our internal conversation, we kind of posed the question, is anybody in the group, you feel like that they are using social media in a healthy way? It was mostly crickets, but we had one person chime in and say that they don't post on social media, but they listen and then they connect people and they get satisfaction off connecting people. Somebody's doing interesting things here. So for you, Weston, how do you use social media? How is it maybe similar, or do you feel like you're using it in a healthy way, or what's your take on that?
Yeah, I don't post much, but most of my stuff is, like you said, listening. So I'll scroll through Facebook, see if people are looking for anything. Same with LinkedIn. I'll just scroll through the newsfeed and see, what people are on the hunt for, what they're posting about. And then I'm in like 6 different Slack channels. So same thing, like I'll go through and like see what's what, like what are folks needing, and then connecting those dots either directly in that thread or, in the DMs. So I don't think I use it unhealthily, but I can, it is, it can be destructive. That's why I don't spend too much time. Like my usage on Facebook has decreased dramatically in the last year, I would say.
Yeah, same. I use LinkedIn a lot just as a tool, like you probably do too, a lot in the last year, but Facebook pretty much gone.
Yeah.
So the job of a founder, it's in many ways it's an impossible job, right? You're trying to keep the lights on, not run out of money. You're trying to recruit a team. You're trying to gain attention so people know what you're doing. You're trying to keep yourself sane, your team sane. You're trying to line up all the partnerships and connections and the people. You're playing the dance between growth and product. When you work with founders, how do you help them through this impossible job? Like, what's your advice for founders right now who may be listening in, who feel overwhelmed, who feel like they're juggling too many things? What do you say to them?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing, what I like to do is when I meet with the founder, just hear what they're up to, hear what their needs are. And literally my skill set is finding people smarter than me to help them. So, I'm more like a node in the network that just helps relay, like, hey, which person in my network should I connect them to?
Mm.
But I think founders I think mentorship is huge. So like asking for advice, and listening. And then also surrounding yourself with other founders. I think you do need that community to encourage you, because eventually like your cup will be empty, if you're just running alone. And so
Mm.
I actually went through a program. There's a MBA program here in Austin called Acton, and it's a year-long, like entrepreneurial focused MBA program. And they used to have an online version that I did. It was called My Entrepreneurial Journey. And how they had it set up was you would do it in concert with another entrepreneur, and then you would get assigned a mentor. And I think having that, like someone a little bit further down the road to kind of give you that wisdom that they gained when they were in your shoes, and then having someone like a running partner almost to kind of keep encouraging you along the way, and someone that you can also bounce ideas off of. Because being a founder is a very lonely position, right? And so I think you need that form a community around you to keep you going.
So how do you make a living then, right? Or if you're a professional connector, you're helping make for founders who may want to work with you, what is the professional engagement, or what does that look like for you personally?
Yeah, so I have different arrangements. Sometimes, like, a lot of times money's it's not the driving force for me. It's literally, I just love connecting.
Yeah.
But I do have a couple of clients that they'll pay me like a small retainer and some commission if any of the intros lead to business.
Yeah.
Others, I have just like a referral agreement. But I don't like chasing after, if it's a small commission amount. I want them to see that there's value. And if they really found value, then, they'll share in the wealth that I brought them.
Mm.
And then that will keep it top of mind. So when I'm out and about meeting with folks, like, if it's 3 vendors and one of them is always like proactively, sending me something, then I'm going to remember them before the other 2 vendors to pitch them. So, and I just love also just meeting founders and just seeing like how I can help them. And especially if they're BIPOC or, female run, those are the ones that I just know that I'm privileged just because I'm a white male in this society, and I can get into some doors that others can't. So anytime that I can help open up doors or help prop them up, even my event series I produce once a month here with my friends, the Misfits. I never want to be if I am on stage, it's only introducing people. Like, I'm not going to be like the host or like trying to do like the fireside chat interviewing. Like, I'm going to have other people in my network and put them on stage, because that's what I'm able to do.
Yeah, word. That's good. Yeah, Saul, in the question of the founder job is impossible for you. What are your advice for founders that are juggling all the things, and how do you help them stay course corrected, centered on the main things? What's your general advice for the overwhelmed founder?
Hopefully you can hear me. Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Don't do all the things like I did last year. It's bad. Try to find really good advisors, right, that you can trust. And I don't mean that as an advisor board or a board of directors. I mean like mentors, right, or good. You talked about connectors, or other people that have sort of been there before, can teach the class, can help you know what you don't need to know, what you don't already know. So find a good network of mentors or people you can build yourself around is really important if you can get it. Not everybody can, right? And that's what you just talked about, Weston. Like, getting a support system around that founding team is one of the best things anybody can do for that team, is giving them a support system. Just like if you were a basketball team, or you were, you guys were going to be in a chess club, right? You invest in the team. You put the best coaches and resources around them to prop them up and make that team awesome, right? So that's what I tell the founders. Imagine you're the team. You need to get your support, and if you have it, the network to go get it, build it. If you don't, find it. So I always find the best advice is find others. Don't try to do it all by yourself. Find others that you can trust, build a network. You got advisors, take them. So I guess there's lots of answers, but it's almost always, it's not just you.
Yeah.
All the answers, like, it's not just you, it's a team and everybody around that team.
Yep.
So for you two, this is second nature. But for maybe more of the more introverted founders or others listening in, how can they be better connectors? How can they be in a place where they can help out more people in their network? Or what should be the process of sort of helping people get more in the connector game?
I would say I always tell people listen and ask questions. So if you're the one talking a lot, then you're probably doing it wrong. People like it when you ask them questions. It keeps the conversation going. So the other thing I say is, like, if a founder is an introvert and like going to a networking event, take a friend or a colleague that is extroverted as a wingman or wingwoman, help get the conversation going, and then just listen what the person's up to, what their needs are, and then offer to help them either with advice, a connection, stuff like that. I don't think enough people do that. And I think the world would be better if they did.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. And I think I said this in I think our first podcast together, Will, that positive game theory, or pay it forward, or just give, right? Whichever variant of that, be a good Samaritan, whichever variant of that game you can imagine, do that. Do that, and it will always work out well. Now you have to put some rules around yourself. You can't be abused. You cannot allow for over extension of yourself, like all that, right? But you should always say, how could I help? If I had all the resources that I have available to me, what could I do to help? If you think about that every day and not what's in it for you, it all will come back to you 10 times over. I mean, every religion has their own version of this, whether it's the golden rule or whatever. It's like you pay it forward, it comes back, but it's because people trust you now, and you're now a colleague, or you are that kind person that they'll remember when you need a hand, right? I can't tell you how many times people come back. I had somebody reach out to me I hadn't talked to in 16 years, and they remembered me as this crazy, like, scared kid sitting in front of a ton of generals, taking down their questions like I was a pro. And they said they could tell I was so uncomfortable, but I knew my stuff, right? And somebody remembered that. I don't remember that at all, but they do. And so to me, that meant that I probably made a connection with somebody that I can't remember, but they remembered. So I did something right. I helped them, or I helped them understand something. Like, they were able to remember me many years later, and she came looking for me. And later on, it turns out to be a very good business partner. But it's things like that you don't think about as part of your game. In the end, it all pays off. It all pays off for so many other reasons. Sometimes it's just they'll come looking for you as a connection.
Yep.
That's really good. That's really good. So for the two of you then, what projects or questions are you thinking about now? Like, what are you working on? Where are you heading? What's the direction with regard to the questions you're stewing on and or projects you're working on?
It's a good question. I know for me, it's, where do I'm still figuring out, like, where do I want to be in the next 5-10 years, just because there's a lot of different avenues I can go down. And so, like I said before, like, this year I'm really trying to focus even more, like, where do I want to spend, even with the connections and stuff. Like, I'm feeling more called to help out those that don't have access or haven't had access in the past, just because I could help out everyone, but I would be more effective if I really hone in, like, what is the avatar of the person that I do want to help connect. So that's kind of what I've been ruminating on and deliberating on.
I like that, the avatar of the person that you want to connect with or help. I like that. I have like this persona, right, or many personas that I think of. That's like, okay, these are the types of people that I want to seek out and help. When I see them, I try to. When I can find them, I will. If I can find a way to systemically help them without having to be at every stage, to your point, I don't want to be in every room. I don't want to have to be on every stage and do it by your side. I could do them. You could do them. We all could do them, but we don't need to do them. We need to get the teams to do them, right? So that's, to me, the thing I look at more is I love building teams. I love building leadership. I love building good outcomes with those teams. Good technology is awesome, but it's the outcome from that technology is the important thing. People don't care about your technology if it doesn't fundamentally move the needle or solve a problem for them, right? And make pain go away. Something along those lines. So for me, when I'm working with teams and communities now, that's my biggest passion. That's my biggest project, is finding ways to build better teams that actually move the needle and create stewardship programs and ownership programs around them. That's how I'm thinking about this more than I ever did before, because I'm convinced the options game is rigged. Right? The VC game is rigged. I mean, all these games are rigged. I've watched the games. I've played the games. We've all played the games. There's a better game out there. I'm convinced of it. And that's what I'm working on now, is experimenting with better game theory here. How do you make everybody never want to leave the game? Right? It's the funnest place forever. You get to play with your friends and your toys, and everybody's rich and everybody's healthy now because we build a better machine around us. That's what I do. That's what I'm thinking about right now, because my utopian brain will not shut off. This last year, it turned on, and now I can't shut it off. So,
and what's interesting too, Saul, and I don't know if you and Will have been seeing this, but I've seen an uptick in, like, I call it the good guys are actually starting to win now, which is interesting. Like, I'm just seeing more folks that have been abundant minded starting to see an uptick in, like, oh, now it's starting to pay off. Yeah. While the other ones, the ones that have been more takers, they're starting to suffer a little bit. I think the pandemic has really shedded light on a lot of the ill dealings, and I think I'm starting to see more good guys win, which is awesome.
Yeah, we're seeing that. It's a really exciting time, and I think this is more than ever. At Prota, our true north is human flourishing, and we just keep beating that drum. As founders get exits or take some money off the table with big rounds, it's more than just give first. It's more than just how can you think about helping humans flourish. It's what are the actions? What's step 1, 2, 3? To actually enact your DE&I policy, to actually help out and mentor people who don't look like you, to actually move the needle with the different projects and founders that you're working with. And that's something we talk about a lot. And it's really an opportunity, I think, like you said, for the people that are in that give first mentality, who espouse that to really flourish. So this is the time. This is the time.
Serendipity, right? That's what I've heard a lot of people saying that lately. I started saying a lot lately, is serendipity. Like, the good guys are winning, the connections are happening, the people are popping up out of the rubble to say, hey, can we do something better? That's what it feels like a lot.
Yeah. So in the meta theme then of community building, I'm thinking this basically in 3 different domains. One, personally, and I think a lot of things we've talked about in this conversation have been extremely good advice for helping people build community, build for themselves. To hopefully we can help move that statistic. Have 50% of people don't have a friend. That still is heartbreaking to me. I'm not going to forget about that anytime soon. And so that's kind of the first thing is the personal community building. And I want to talk a little bit at the rest of this conversation on the next 2 domains, which is for people in startups, like maybe they're CMO or they've been tasked as the actual community builders. How do you build community around your product or service so that you're genuinely helping people? And then the third one, which we'll talk about last, is how do we help the politicians, the policy makers, the people in local governments who are trying to spur economic development and to spur startup community building? Because one of my companies I did in the 2010s, we were expanding to different cities around the country and really around the world. And we started interacting with policy leaders and local government officials that really wanted to spur economic vitality. And they had all these different questions. So we'll get there. But let's maybe on the topic of, for the CMOs, of the community builders in companies, what advice, Weston, do you have for them to build community around their product or service?
Yeah, I think what's funny is I was actually part of a community called socialmedia.org. I was one of their community managers for a bit. So it's like Fortune 500 executives that want to ask questions, especially when Twitter launched. Like, how does a Fortune 500 company tweet to their customers? I think what communities, if you want to build a community around a product or service, I think one, you just got to provide value. Like, why should they go to your community when there's so many other communities out there? Like, I feel like you need to provide either information that's going to help them succeed, make them get better use out of the product or service. And like we said, 50% of Americans don't have friends. Some of these communities, they become lifelong friends. I mean, look at the Lego community. These adult Lego aficionados, like, it's a very robust community, and it's all around, a product. And so I think providing value and providing connections, even when I was at socialmedia.org, they did a great job they basically, the members consider themselves family members. So these folks, when they get together, like, they literally, there's a family album on the website with all the member companies showing up, and they've all become good friends. They all end up working together. So I think creating that community and value would really make it strong for that product or service company.
How about you, Saul, on the community building on a product or service? What's your advice?
Well, so I wear lots of hats, and right now one of my big ones is I'm a solutions architect at a very large firm, right? So I'm at a company called Talis. My role right now is building a fairly large machine that's going to sort of change how we work with our customers and address our customers. And the one thing that was the missing ingredient when we were all sitting there on paper is like, okay, this is a great idea. We had tech teams, we had product teams, we had all these things down. We didn't have a community. When we actually said, there's 9 of us in this room, we're founders. And when we said that, the room changed, right? So sometimes it's as simple as just making a decision together, as we are coming together to ratify a change, and that is going to happen together. That's the beginning of community. Now, in this case, it was 9 parties coming together to say, we got to bind together to make this stick. Otherwise, we're all going to fight for our fiefdoms, right? Or we're going to have to defend our requirements for our needs for this transformation. Like, all of this bureaucracy emerges. When you're a team, it all disappears, right? So that's the advice I have, is like, it doesn't have to be just in startups. You can do it inside of a big conglomerate, but you got to create that room, and you got to set that moment up. Like, we got to cauterize and come together, and then we can do it together. So
that's great. That's great. All right. So then, last topic is for the government officials out there, the people on city councils, the people in economic development groups. What is the advice? And I know there's, I think Brad Feld wrote a book on startup communities and a variety of other materials out there on how to develop a startup ecosystem. But even from your vantage point, even in the Austin community and seeing that, what is your advice for government officials out there who are trying to vitalize their communities to make it more startup or tech oriented? What's your advice for them?
Yeah, so I did have a past life in politics and at the state level, but I would say, those representatives need to listen and get the full breadth of their constituents. So, a lot of times we have a lot of government officials that talk and don't listen. And so I think those that actually go sit in homes of all the different people involved, not just the ones that are writing the checks, but the ones that are the least of these in the community, I think is very important, because even our local government has failed a lot with how we've addressed a lot of our constituents here in Austin, and I think if they would just actually go out and meet with them and really hear them out, I think we would benefit from that.
How about you, Saul?
Agreed. Listen, learn, break down barriers. Diversity is a good thing, not a bad thing. learn something new from somebody else. All these great things that our Sunday schools taught us, or our parents were supposed to teach us, or our communities were supposed to teach us. Like, that's the stuff you're supposed to do, right? And I think I don't have any more advice other than try to be good people and then create communities of good people. Nothing's bad about that. So,
fantastic. Well, gentlemen, this has been amazing. I think a lot of things going on in my brain with regard to next steps or questions that I have or things for us to pursue. But final question: for people who want to continue the conversation with each of the two of you, where can people find you online?
Yeah, so on LinkedIn it's just Weston Woodward. I think it's also the same on Twitter, and Instagram is Weston Armstrong Woodward. So happy to connect with anyone and hear them out and see how I can connect the dots.
And for me, it's Sol Cates at all of those as well. It's Sol Cates at Twitter and Sol Cates at LinkedIn. You can find me there.
Awesome. Well, gentlemen, really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Yeah, it was a pleasure.
All right, a couple quick things before you go. Number one, I have a general newsletter where I write about technology and startups and health science and teaching people to code. And I write about a variety of different subjects that we talk about on this show. So if you go to wclittle.com, there you'll be able to subscribe, and you'll also be able to subscribe to particular topics. If you're just interested in one or a few of them, you'll be notified right when I publish new content in those areas. Number two, my partners and I at Prota Ventures have a portfolio company called Startup Rocket. If you go to startuprocket.com, there you'll be able to receive coaching guides and customize an operations framework for you and your team and your advisors to be on the same page in terms of what is the appropriate next step for you and your entrepreneurial journey. And finally, if you wouldn't mind leaving a review anywhere that you have listened to this podcast or watched this podcast, it would be super helpful to help those who might be interested in consuming this content as well. Thank you.